When most of us think about markets, we think about markets for products or services. But our next guest recently helped the John Locke Foundation consider this topic, the market for neighborhoods. Salim Furth is Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on, Mitch.
So you are applying a principle of economics to neighborhoods, which is something that I think most people probably don't think about. How should people consider neighborhoods in the context of economics?
So I came to this question because I wanted to think about areas where we can get outside of the free market versus government fight, right? So it's very clear that governments can't make a neighborhood good. It's also very clear that the market doesn't work in the sense of creating community the way that it works in creating rulers or bananas or cars, right? There isn't just a corporation that produces neighborhoods. And, The Truman Show maybe is the exception to that if you watch that old movie. But so how do we as citizens produce together these community goods that we really value, or people know they want to pay more to live in a good neighborhood than a bad neighborhood, but how do we produce that? And how much do we value it? And I think those are both good questions, and so that's what I'm trying to explore in today's talk.
And so basically, people who think about this and applying economics to neighborhoods, there are a lot of different factors in there. It's not just trying to buy a banana and picking among them, or trying to buy a car, picking among those options. Right. There are a lot of different factors that go into neighborhoods. Yeah,
and it's very hard to know really how much do we value neighborhood in the community sense, right? So you can't unbundle location, right? So any house that you buy or any place you go is that place. It's stuck in two-dimensional space on the face of the earth somewhere. And so when you're thinking about buying a house, you're thinking about, okay, the commute distance to one job, the commute distance to another job, the traffic on your street, the relative ease of getting to the highway. Can you walk to school? Is the drive to the grocery store far? And then one of those many factors is, are you embedded in sort of this positive social space? And I think one of the interesting factors here is, from the buyer's perspective, of a potential buyer, it's really hard to know before you've lived somewhere whether it is a vibrant neighborhood where people know each other and take care of each other, or if it's kind of the kind of place where people just mind their own business and won't talk to you.
We are chatting with Salim Furth. He is Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. When you put on the economics cap to look at neighborhoods, did you find that there were some things about it that you hadn't thought of before? That you thought about the price of a house, whether the neighborhood looks good, whether the neighbors seem friendly. Did the economics piece add a new dimension you hadn't really thought of before?
Yeah, so neighborhoods are definitely a public good. And I think we make the mistake when we think about public goods that we think public means government provided. And what public means is that anybody can use it, right? That it's just there. So if you build a building with beautiful architecture, anybody walking past has the right to look at your building and enjoy the beautiful architecture you made. So we use this in Econ 101 classes to say, well, beautiful architecture is underprovided because people don't get all the benefits themselves. The investor doesn't get all the benefits of building beautifully. So we have too few beautiful buildings in the sense relative to what we might want. And neighborhoods are the same way. In one sense, you can think about it as a negative, that we have less community than we might want because it takes, people like, store proprietors and volunteers and pastors who invest a lot in their community, but they don't really get all the benefits. Those benefits kind of get scattered to other people. So maybe we have too little of it. That's the negative side. The positive side is that if you look at any really high-functioning neighborhood, you find a few people who are really investing and making that place great. And you can, if you value this, you can choose to be one of those people. You can be the kind of busy, positively busy neighbor who's volunteering, who's cleaning up, who's making sure people know about the raffle and doing time at your local club. And you can have a really big outsized influence in making where you live one of those strong, socially tight neighborhoods.
What does your research tell you about the government's role in all of this?
So government has, I think, two really big roles to play. And again, this is a place where I don't even think we can talk about the free market because we're so far removed. We've never had a modern city that was built in an anarchic fashion, right? So as long as the government builds roads, for example, or decides where the sewers are going to go, that has massive influence on the shape of our communities. So I think there's two really big things the government can do. So one is zoning, which is right now the way that cities in North Carolina and around the country decide how land is going to be used, is that they set, basically they take a map, and it's like Sim City, if you ever played that when you were younger. They'll say, okay, all the commercial is going to go here, and all the residential is going to go here. And it turns out they generally, from a neighborhood perspective, they do a really poor job of that. So they tend to overzone for retail, especially out along main roads. And what that does is it creates artificially cheap prices for retail land, cheaper than residential or other uses. And they often then, on top of that, give tax benefits to bring in a big box store to put out on the main road. And that cannibalizes their own downtowns. So if you're kind of a traditional like railroad stop town in North Carolina, there's a lot of these around which the bigger suburbs are built, probably your city government is actively undermining your historic business district by artificially cheapening land along the main roads and giving tax breaks to the big box stores. And then everyone says, well, it's just the market, mom and pop shops can't survive today. It's like, well, Panera got a tax break and, so-and-so's bar and grill has been there for 40 years and didn't. And now we wonder why the bar and grill is going out of business and Panera is succeeding. That's not the free market. So that's one of the things. The other thing is government facilities. We had breakfast out in Wendell this morning at a delightful little shop, and out on the elementary school is right in the center of town. It causes a little congestion in the morning. Everybody comes and goes, but you can walk your kid to school if you live in Wendell. When your kid is old enough to walk themselves to school, however, then they transfer to the middle school, which is 3 miles out of town on a main road. So there's no chance for your kid to kind of grow up in that community and with the safety of they know their neighbors and they can walk themselves to school. And that's this government decision of, well, we're going to build the middle school where there's a lot of parking and cheap land instead of building it in a way that integrates into an existing community. And if you're a policymaker, that's one of the most influential things you do is you build these schools, post offices, other facilities that can be anchors or can kind of pull people away from the communities that they live in.
So in the brief time that we have left, the policy implications would be stop doing that?
Yeah, stop doing that. So on the zoning side, be a lot more flexible. Now, I understand nobody wants to have a paper mill in their subdivision or a Walmart on their side street bringing a ton of traffic. So there's reasonable things for the government to regulate in land use. But when you're talking about stores going into a traditional downtown, well, stores kind of belong there. Or maybe your traditional downtown needs to transition to more residential use, right? So retail, in the age of Amazon, we don't need as much retail space, and we've overzoned for it. So allowing uses to transition to other reasonable uses in that sphere is a really positive step. And then being cognizant, when you make a community decision about a location of a public facility, put it somewhere that people want to be and that helps grow your community and supports your local businesses instead of undermining them.